à toutes et à tous.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you. Some of you that I've already seen and others, I'm seeing you for the first time, but I'm delighted to welcome all of you for this session, which is one of the last of this great edition of INCYBER in Lille. Thank you to all of those and welcome to you who are following us online. Now, this afternoon, we're going to be talking about EUCS, the decline of a European ambition, ? Well, we're going to be talking about this with my three guests. You know that it's been 5 years that ELISA is working on the European certification framework for cloud services, which is the EUCS that we're talking about, which is intended to harmonize the criteria for assessment and the levels of assurance at the European level by defining common standards for providers, for cloud service providers. So in the last version of the project, well, we're going to come back to this. Well, the high plus level is involving a number of questions and has raised a number of criticisms, especially for those who are keen on European sovereignty, digital sovereignty, and of course France is among those. So let's see where we stand today. Let's see where the exchanges and discussions stand. And for those who are blocking the evolution of this topic, and also discuss what's happening in 2025, see the positions of the different stakeholders, the challenges, but also the contributions of the text. So we're going to talk about this with our three guests. First and foremost, Garance Mathias, who is a lawyer. Thank you, Garance, for being here with me. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation. And thank you. I represent the Clusif organization, so I'm also pleased to be here with you. And then Thomas Saint-Julien, I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you, Thomas, for preparing this session with AFNOR, the French certification agency, and you're tasked with cybersecurity certifications development at AFNOR, the French certification agency. And then we have the pleasure of having Eric with us, Eric Vetillard. Thank you for accepting this invitation. You're a lead certification expert at ENISA. So we are pleased to be here with you to come back to a number of topics. Perhaps for the people in the room, I don't know how much you know about the main topics of this EUCS topic. So perhaps we could just quickly give an overview of the concrete information. What is it we're talking about, and maybe define the objectives? Perhaps, Eric, you'd like to start. Yes. Fine. Well, the EUCS is a European scheme, and its essential objective is to tend towards harmonization among the different schemes that existed at the European level with mutual recognition among the different states. It means that a cloud service can be certified in any of the 27 member states, and the certification will be recognized throughout the European Union. So it is an ambitious objective. We'll see, well, once there's, once we start discussing it, we'll see that not all the states agree on every point. Well, the criteria are mostly quite conventional, in fact. You can already have access to them because these are criteria that we defined in technical specification CEN-TS 026, and over 90% of the criteria in there. There are just some additional criteria which are probably not the most difficult to implement that are in the scheme. We also included a number of transparency criteria. So the idea of the transparency criteria is that there are many criteria for which we can define the fact that we need to have a certain level. But there are some other criteria where it depends on the risk levels of the various consumers. Take an example. We had audits in certain sectors. It's important to have the right to undertake audits in some sectors. So directives that compel finance departments to do it. However, everyone doesn't have this problem. For people who don't necessarily want to go and audit their cloud providers. So we've identified this as a transparency requirement. There's a requirement to declare your policy so that there is no surprise for the client. There's a possibility on a certified service to check whether it corresponds to the criteria we actually need. So Again, this scheme has been designed with a view to sharing responsibility among cloud providers and clients, consumers, clients. Well, the client here is supposed to be a company with a cybersecurity competence and a capacity to understand the answers that are provided by the cloud provider. So we're not talking about a service certification for the public at large. We are talking for the microcosmos of cybersecurity, in fact. Garance, would you perhaps like to add to something from a legal viewpoint? What is your analysis? Yes, this standard, this certification is important. And I'm not saying the contrary, not by any means, but it raises a number of questions and discussions. Hence the title, I think, Decline of an Ambition. Is it a decline or not? Well, we can discuss that. At the very least, it is a question. I'm going to ask myself a question about existing documents that are just purely French, that talk about the SecNumCloud reference. And in another area, which is related to topical issues and current events, which are geopolitical relations. We're going to be talking with the US and maybe focusing on the US, but we could also be talking about other states. And with everything that's going on, and everyone, of course, is up to date with current events, with executive orders that are being signed every day from the beginning, and executive orders that could challenge data protection. So it's not the text we're talking about today, but it is a text that is a foundation, a cornerstone of governance, and which provides protection of information assets for the companies, so all related to the protection of data. So this reference framework, the certification, will it allow our businesses, our companies, to be protected from access, whether authorized or unauthorized? We'll see this, but whether that access is authorized or unauthorized, by third countries, so extraterritorial components. And this is the challenge, and it's part of the criticism leveled at the text, and it's part of the criticism that was raised by the French Data Protection Authority, CNIL, and the French Data Protection Authority expressed a public opinion, and that was done in July of last year, and they talk about the risks related to this European project with respect to security, so not only technological security, but legal security as well, with respect to the risk of transfer and lack of control of our data, whether it's personal data, but data assets generally speaking. Thank you, Garance. We're going to come back to all these points that represent risks and that are absolutely essential, and that are but basically the whole topic of our discussion today, to try to understand with reason, not with passion, to understand and address a number of issues, and to address the reasons for these pain points, these blocking points, and try to understand why these security issues pose a problem in that dimension, in particular because the different European states do not have the same level of maturity. That is a topic, perhaps. Perhaps, Julien, you could say something from the, from the AFNOR to say what we're doing in France, in particular the SecNumCloud that Garance is talking about. Yes, thank you. The most logical analogy would be for EUCS and SecNumCloud is the French component of that. Well, of course, SecNumCloud in France is version 3.2, like this room, in fact. So it's the March 2022 version, which imposes extraterritorial components in Article 19, so referring to the Privacy Shield in particular. And ANSSI has said it's under the aegis of the French National Cybersecurity Agency, ANSSI, since 2017. And what we see for France, we see increasing demands, increasing requests. In France, there's AFNOR certification is one of the certification agencies. We always asked about EUCS because we cannot answer on behalf of the French National Cybersecurity Agency. But what we see at the level of France, there's more and more demand. We have 15 offers. We're not qualifying an infrastructure. We are qualifying a service offer, SecNumCloud service offer. We have 11 pending applications, and I see an increase, a 70% increase in the number of requests over the last year. When I started working on this topic, we had very, very few applications, but we see that they are coming in increasingly, despite the fact that the clients really know that EUCS is going to be arriving soon, and we don't know in what format it's going to be integrated with respect to the high plus level that you referred to. So companies are taking a risk, but a risk that is carried by the market as well, because the market is, there's a lot of demand on the market, and the state is also playing this role with the Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne when she was Prime Minister, Mr. Bruno Le Maire, and saying that all the sensitive data have to be hosted on a certified cloud. But how do you analyze this increase in requests? What is this in applications? What does this mean? When you say that companies are taking a risk, what do you mean by that? Well, they're taking a risk because it is a complicated, costly, and demanding evaluation assessment. The audit assessment part is not even the most important part, in fact, because there's a lot of compliance requirements. So it's a very demanding reference framework. Companies don't necessarily know if SecNumCloud is going to be kept when EUCS comes into force. So it's a risk, obviously, but the state is also covering that, whereas UGAP is now also referring to SecNumCloud offers for health issues. We also talked about CNIL, which is the national. You also have the National Digital and Post Agency. There was an open letter by 35 cloud providers all over Europe, and they alerted the Commission to that. So we can't not talk about current events. Things are changing every day. Just 2 weeks ago, the Netherlands, who were for the removal of High Plus with Germany, the Netherlands actually voted measures asking for the creation of a cloud, a national sovereign cloud in the Netherlands to avoid having to go through the American cloud. So in fact, France is not that alone in its position. Now, to come back to your question about the risks, in France, the market logic is pushing us towards that, but we're talking about France. But as then an assessment body, we're also requests coming in from cloud providers from the European Union, from Italy. So it's not just being a French, nationalistic or position. There are a lot of cloud providers elsewhere. We can also talk about Blue Essence, for example, and other joint ventures or Franco-American joint ventures who in fact, are able to circumvent the 3.2 referential by having majorly French assets so that it cannot circumvent the outcloud. Garance, what you were talking about is a reaction or a complement to what Julian was saying. France doesn't seem to be so alone anymore. Is this a visionary or a precursor or a forerunner? Are we being joined by others, maybe reinforcing the European posture in light of the geopolitical aspect that goes way beyond cyber and digital? Yes, Melanie, the current geopolitical position, we've seen that there are positions that were expressed by industrialists, this, consortia of industrialists to raise awareness among political stakeholders and political players, and to make sure this is done at the national and at the European level. And also the fact that in France, we already have SecNumCloud in many versions, so we already have, some hindsight with respect to that, even if we were forerunners. So the work of the French Cybersecurity Agency, ANSSI, is extremely important and structuring. But as you said yourself, this is quite a bulky and difficult process. So if I stand on both sides, there's a commitment on the part of industrialists, especially European manufacturers, to have the requirements recognized. But there is also a level, but it's more organizational and technical, to see what those requirements are. From a legal viewpoint, because that's my job, there are provisions, as you said, that have to be included in contracts. So that's also part of the recommendations to work on the contracts, to negotiate the contracts, to accept the contracts, to require a framework for these texts, bearing in mind that we're on extraterritorial laws, but the stipulations, the contractual stipulations will help us to manage those requests, but we'll never do away with them. If we have an American judge, for example, who sends us a warrant, we will have to respond to that. If we have an order to provide information, we will have to respond, but we will have to be transparent so that the end customer is aware of the existence of that judge's order, but that's the legal framework, but not necessarily the host who will receive it. So we have to be able to convey the information, but to also establish a framework for that. And in the geopolitical context, perhaps just looking to see what's going to be happening in the next executive orders that will be signed on data protection. We, can imagine that in the weeks to come, there might be a challenge or a questioning of the data privacy framework. There is a Schrem dialogue that the Max Schrem dialogue, it was discussed a few days ago at this very forum. So there are other American entities, organizations, and bodies where, officers at all those organizations were strongly encouraged to resign, and they were the guarantors. They were guaranteeing individual freedoms in the U.S. So the geopolitical context is going to help us to take our position and stance. Eric, I could just ask you for some information, just as a reaction to what was mentioned. There are a lot of questions that were raised by Garance about data protection, Eric's extraterritoriality, American law, for example, as well. How is all of this evolving? We see that this is a living matter, looking in geopolitics today. What was true 2 weeks ago is maybe no longer true today. And over the next few weeks, of course, it could change again. So through this EUCS text and the evolution of the situation, what can we say based on what Garance was saying in answer to the questions she raised? So today, concerning the text, I think that what we need to understand is that there is no general political disagreement. From the start, all the member states are agreeing on the main notion, the notion of strategic autonomy or sovereignty. It's more rhetorical, it covers the same thing. But there is something very important there. We have to see, for example, that the Netherlands, who haven't always been aligned with France, but they were also among those who had the strongest views about targeting Microsoft, because Microsoft was doing things that were what they considered were not very good with their health data. So at a certain level, there's a problem with application, with enforcement of all of this. So the disagreement is mainly on the way in which we do this, not on the objective, in the way in which we do it. And so perhaps it's a little bit complicated to manage. So for us, another difficulty, which is, of course, it comes up time and time again, is the management of, GDPR and the way this is done. There are national authorities. There is a working group as well. We work with the EDPB. We're working actively on the way of using EUCS to work on certification logics and cybersecurity aspects of the GDPR. And so that's something we've started doing with them. Today, it remains a topic that is difficult to address between states and among states. It's also difficult because we are not in a process where we're creating a regulation. So it's not a parliament pushing us It's not the Council pushing us. We're, in fact, in a technical process. And, they didn't just tell us in ENISA, you're going to define 3 criteria and that's okay, So the fact that we have more political issues tends to bring us to some blocking points, and we have no mechanism in our work method to force the mechanism through. And we do not have the authority to do it. We don't have the authority to force or to compel anyone to move forward. So sometimes we do reach a blocking point, and it is sometimes difficult. But if you see the way it's happened, the communication around EUCS, well, there's some crises every 6 or 9 months, and we talk about it for a month, then everything goes on as before. So perhaps we could speed it up and come to harmonization slightly faster. And what's going on right now at the geopolitical level, could that sort of maybe find a way to release the situation, settle the situation, reopen the dialogue and exchanges to get things moving forward? Or on the contrary, given that the challenges and the stakes are very high and at a supra level, maybe EUCS would be forgotten among the pile of things to be dealt with at the Commission level? Well, I believe that there are differences here. There's the Commission, but it's not just the Commission, it's the Member States as well. And of course, the Member States will be making the decision. Today, what we observe is at the level of urgency is increasing in the Member States in 2 different ways. In fact, there are 2 problems, and they're very different. The first is to have a certification mechanism that is a basic certification mechanism to ensure that we have the right level of cybersecurity. I believe that there is an opportunity here for many European cloud providers to emphasize and showcase their advantages. And it is worthwhile to have a substantial certification, which is the average level. That is what we suppose will be the normal level for a reasonable quality cloud service. That is what is important to obtain as a label, to have a label with visibility at the European level, to be able to sell your service beyond your national borders. Then there are also needs at the high level, so which is quite similar to SecNumCloud. There's some aspirations, but not only. But today, the way in which we define these services, we say that people who are certified at the high level are people who are going to consider security as an added value in their offer. It's not people who are offering a normal cloud service. They're going to say, here you have a service, you're going to be paying more, but you have the maximum level of security. There you have it. So that was the reasoning from the start. In particular, there were a number of stakeholders who were considering 2 services, one substantial and one high, bearing in mind that the high level requires mechanisms which are somewhat more costly. So, when you think about SecNumCloud, the problem is they're going to be asking for things that are not conventional, classic. So the implementation is difficult because we're asking them to do more than what is normal. So it's the same thing, and there it's slightly more complicated. It's in this context that we have more geopolitical issues coming up. So yes, we can feel today that there's a lot going on here since the beginning of the year. That's quite true. Yes, absolutely. So I think we have every reason to be hopeful. But those who are following this topic know that I've said, I don't know how many times that I was hopeful. So sometimes I don't even, want to say it anymore. But once again, let me say that I am hopeful. I do think we can reach a solution. And again, every time, everyone learns something. So the position of each of us can evolve. We've made different proposals. ANSSI, the French cybersecurity agency, has evolved as well at the level of its proposals, and the other member states as well. So what we can hope today is that it will be easier going forward, obtaining something that can be some form of consensus. So we would be looking at a substantial level rather than a high level to reach this consensus, and it might evolve, in fact, further on down the line. Would that allow us to get going again, to restore these exchanges and reach a solution? It can be a way of operating, first to have a stage that allows the European stakeholders to position themselves at a time when there might be an opportunity to gain market shares with respect to American stakeholders. But I think that's not all there is. I think having said all that, we're trying to see how we can also address these issues of specifically regarding independence with respect to extraterritorial laws.
So having said that, from these elements, how do you perceive that? Do you perceive that there could be a cooperation or a cohabitation, a coexistence of SecNumCloud and EUCS at a substantial level? Would it be a problem at the level of France or not necessarily? I will answer with the coexistence of the two schemes. What I can foresee is that the EUCS can add the suppressed high plus level, or the Commission can decide. France can also opt out. Denmark has done it already. Or as you said, there could be a high level implemented, but the extraterritorial law aspect will not be there in the text. I would say a cohabitation of the two schemes would be complicated because we need a normalization of certification throughout Europe, so it would be a bit contradictory with the initial ambition of EUCS. But as you say, there's a French dichotomy where France pushes forwards for SecNumCloud, but at the same time, Polytechnique or the French Education Ministry calls for projects from Microsoft. Some people want to know where their data are, what is done with their data. We can see an analogy with the sector of defense. EU became aware that we have to have budget at the level of Europe for our security. And then the problem of the cloud, the SecNumCloud offer is that it is 20% more expensive than a normal cloud offer. So this is the question: are you willing to pay more to have a higher quality service? Maybe the call for tender issue is interesting because there are other rules, other laws, not just these different certification schemes. There are law of competition. All of this necessitates, independently from the certification and law texts and Cybersecurity Act, that enable those certification. It's more a question to the lawmakers. So the question is, where do we go? Where are we going to? So it is very delicate, and it's very important that we integrate some criteria that would de facto exclude some actors in the market. I think that the debate is not to know if there's a decline or not. I think we have to define our requirements. There's a political issue of regulation in terms of geopolitics. We can see the genesis of a Europe of defense. There used to be an ambition of excluding a Europe of defense, because a lot of very powerful and charismatic leaders were advocating against such positions. in the economy also we all going for a common position. I will go beyond this vision and ask, when you're a public or private stakeholder in France, if you want to sign a contract with extraterritorial organizations, how can you how can these certifications and regulations can help, and what is its place in those contracts? We have the guarantee of the legality. So to help enterprises, companies to choose and to have the means to comply with the regulations while protecting themselves with regards to the extraterritorial laws. There's a question of costs. There's a question of capacity of a company to mobilize means, time and human resources to comply to the certification with the certification. So there's an issue, there's a great challenge with the call for tenders with extraterritorial actors and on public markets. Maybe Eric, you would like to add something? Yes, there's something that we are not talking about. Is the competition laws are quite bothering, if I may say. If we implement rules and requirements that will exclude de facto exclude some actors of the market, even ANSI went backwards on some requirements that were a bit too ambitious. Some people tend to forget that there are other European certifications, regulations that are worked on, like NIS2, for example. Netherlands has started. There was a scandal that there's around the risk of loss of sovereignty, and that it is not sufficiently analyzed with a risk analysis. So, and there is not enough protection against data leak to extra-European actors. And I hope that it is something that will improve. We were talking about Polytechnique or the Ministry of National of the Education that turned to Microsoft. Maybe for national education, why not? But Polytechnique, who is working with defense actors, with the army, maybe I would like to say that it is important that we protect our sovereignty and our sensitive data. So if we come back to EUCS, what we proposed last year that was not seen is that we added transparency requirements. For example, you have a call for tenders from someone that says they are certified, and they swear that the information is valid. So today we had this proposal that we were hoping it was sufficient, but it didn't work out. So this, again, it is somewhere where we evolved in our approach. But there are still discussions around this thing, and there are things that are done on the European level, and some other things that are done on the national level, but not only, also with the cooperation of companies and ministries. But the fact is, as a matter of fact, 70% of the market shares are owned by United States stakeholders, so it is difficult to exclude them, and we have to try to have a European labelization certification. Do we have other information on what are the next steps? After 5 years, we can't foresee anything. We stopped hoping for precise dates. We're not that ambitious. Maybe another reaction on what was said before? There's not just law that is long to be made. Yes, indeed. What level we implement, what tools and means, organizational, technical, or legal, we are leveraging. This is also the geographical location of the servers. This is a challenge. There is also an ambition to work with the whole planet every day, at every time. This will come off as a bit provocative, but this certification, will it help us tackle those challenges in terms of business? What can we do? What is the... Okay, I'd say the mapping of the risk is critical. And I'm not talking about, in terms of data, I'm not looking at personal data, but
parce que c'est obligatoire, mais ça l'était déjà, c'est des bons réflexes pour les RSSI, enfin, ça fait partie des outils de base.
This is part of the basic tools of governance to know where my data are, who manages them, why, what, do what, and what is my profession, my line of business, and what are the risks inherent there too. We're really waiting for that certification. I'm also waiting for other postures with regard to competition law, public contracting law, and so on. Julien, you wanted to add something perhaps? Yes, well, we're talking about the markets, the gap with SecNumCloud. We can talk about the market logic and say, why is the figure so low, but why do so many companies want to qualify their offer of services with SecNumCloud? I'm not on the client side, so I don't really know that. But beyond France and the European Union, there are American companies doing joint ventures, so I imagine that they have millions of contracts behind that are going to be used, and at least we've also said that SecNumCloud is too much in a normative mode, but initially SecNumCloud complies with with American legislation. So, so it's not just France, coming up with norms. We were just responding to US norms and protection of extraterritorial elements. In France, I think it's starting to develop in the European Union as well. We can only hope that the international geopolitical context will play in our favor. Thank you to all three of you. We still have a little bit of time ahead of us. Do you have any questions? Yes. We're going to give you a microphone. Yes, hello. Thank you for your comments. So you are rehabilitating a famous sentence from Michel Audor, which is the nervous breakdown. You know, in the French movie with Bertrand with Blier, but it was almost like a bipolar approach. 50 meters away from you, there are suppliers I know who are promising their clients water tightness from extraterritorial norms. There is a technology supplier associated with another technology supplier who has promised me that it will be totally watertight. And what you're telling me, it does not exist today and it will never exist. That's the first thing. The second thing, you know that in France, you probably read the Free and Independent Press, is that there is a political reaction with respect to digital sovereignty, and there's an influence operation directly from a website in particular that brought out the Polytechnique school case and the national education situation. And they're doing US bashing, and that's a political operation which is steered by a billionaire from the west of the Western Parisian region. What you may understand is that everybody's looking westward. What's going to happen if tomorrow it's not some sort of news, somebody called Donald who's signing executive orders? Will we be as wary of the peril to our east? Would EUCS be working in the same way if the threat came from the east, if it was another geopolitical bloc that could also come politically wanting to close everything, talking about a red button logic? So EUCS, are we not focusing on the US peril in the way it exists today on the news channels without looking at the Chinese peril, which is probably going to exist? Maybe I'll try to answer the first part on the water tightness. What do you mean by that? Are we talking about technical tightness, technical protection? I imagine what you're talking about. Basically, a secure data, the basic cloud is somebody else's computer. So you have to answer that. And then it is the ANSSI, the French agency, who decides on the qualification, whether the companies respect the requirements, and there's no reason. Yes. But this company is not yet certified for SecNumCloud. It's probably in your 11 files you were talking about. If we're talking about the same, it's not among the 11, but we think that they're going to file an application soon. And if they do so, it's because, well, the onus is on ANSSI to... We work with SecNumCloud under the aegis of ANSSI, but we are not the ones who make the qualification direction and the certification direction. It is ANSSI, the French cybersecurity agency, that makes that decision. That's for the first time part of your question. Yes, now to come back to the first part of the question. There was, well, a long time ago, there was a version of EUCS, level high plus, or level of responsibility with requirements that were higher for SecNumCloud. Now, with respect to the others, today we talk about transparency with respect to exposure to non-European laws. We're not talking about US laws. Of course, it's taken into account. There's a law that we're familiar with, which is a law on espionage in China, which is, well, quite significant and which is quite clearly in our line, in the line that we're looking at. There are quite a few others in other countries. So this is something that is quite well known. Of course, we're always afraid of seeing some cloud from some country we've never heard about, because all of a sudden we're going to have to look at their legislation to make sure there's no problem. But most of the clouds today come from countries that we're very familiar with at this point, and we have an idea of the laws that could pose problems. Just to follow on from that, yes, we were focusing on, well, of course, in light of current events, we're talking mostly about American current events, but there are other countries that have extraterritorial laws, whether it's Australia, for example, to go away from China, but of course, there's also China and other countries to the east. So risk management, what we were saying earlier, is also mapping the countries with which we work, identifying the risks. The law, in fact, irrespective of having tight systems, watertight systems that are tight technically, and that's not what I'm focusing on my work. Well, if there's an order that's issued by a judge and a warrant, there will be a legal response. And there is an office in France at Bercy, which is called CICE, which helps companies to answer when there are requests. These are judges, prosecutors, so trained legal experts who are used to dealing with such legal requests. So there is support on the part of the state. So I'll let the experts on technical tightness answer, but we also have other extraterritorial aspects, not just the US. Yes, of course, the current events geopolitically we're talking about are not just the US, but also a number of other countries. And at the Directorate General for Businesses at Bercy acts on that dimension and supports businesses. There are also other departments, in particular, well, in the state, which are a bit long to explain now, but there is a state dimension which is strong to support this approach. We have another question at the back of the room. Do you have a microphone, sir? Yes. Yes, thank you, and thank you to all four of you. Yes, I'm very familiar with the EUCS myself, because I was the CSIO of a company, the first one that was SecNumCloud certified. So we think, well, we know what it is, or at least we hope so. So, we really struggled and fought a lot to become SecNumCloud. So it's what I regret is the fact that the ecosystem is not moving. In fact, there are companies that really work hard, to get that SecNumCloud approval. And there is the EUCS that then comes along. We really believed in it. We were convinced, and we said to ourselves, well, SecNumCloud would be replaced by EUCS at the European level. That was great because it represented, of course, an additional market, beyond the mere French market. But what is a pity, I think, is that our politicians are not very on board with this topic. And nothing is moving, in fact, as you were saying, with French national education, the Polytechnic school. Everybody's Microsoft. So it's very difficult to do EUCS in that context. And so my question, well, I don't know if you can answer it, but do you really think that our politicians, our political leaders have awareness of the fact that sovereignty is going to need to be a reality and not just words that are expressed, because it sounds nice? Yes, I might try to take that first. I think raising awareness is slow, but but it is happening. But you have a text, a 2024 text that mentions the data hub, sensitive data under SecNumCloud. It is a drop of water, but it is happening. But Mr. Philippe Latombe is also very focused on these security issues. But I believe he's, alone or too alone. He is a member of parliament, and he's not alone in the French parliament. Of course, we could hope for more people, but he's not alone anymore. And he was here, in fact, at this forum with other members of parliament and French senators. And the senators are much more focused on this topic. So I think things are moving. And then also look at the manufacturers, the industrialists, in France, like Germany, where the government, is speaking to the French, to the German automobile industry. And here we're talking about, or in France, we're talking about French clouders. I think it can happen. I think that the current political challenges will help us do that. Unfortunately, it is a slow process. As it was said, there are increasingly pan-European initiatives. There was a letter signed. There's the Gaia X initiative as well that we haven't talked about a lot, but that did discuss these sovereignty issues that we may have forgotten about now. But it did. So we're not starting from scratch, and we are hopeful. Yes, but I also think that at the level of the French state, there are things that are very good, that have been very good things that have been done, Twin Cloud Center. There are a certain number of initiatives on the part of the French Cybersecurity Agency, ANSSI. There are things that are done, but they're not applied. What we need, in a manner of speaking, is the same report that the Dutch had that will trigger something, that something will happen in their parliament, that somebody is, just basically saying, now, guys, there are risks and we have to apply them. The rules exist, everything is available, specifically for public stakeholders to do what they have to do, but they don't do it. So it's coming, things are moving, things are changing, and I think the geopolitical situation we have today will probably be an accelerator, which will be quite interesting. And to follow on from that, it's true that for the Netherlands, the report of the Court of Auditors dates back to January. And on the 19th of March, they already started working by banishing half of the American clouds. So the Netherlands acted quite quickly. Is there another question? We have just a few minutes left to finish our session. If there is one last question for our guests. No more questions? In that case, I'd really like to thank all three of you. It was really a pleasure to have you here with us on this topic. And of course, well, Eric, you can't give us a date because we understand, but we will continue to follow what's happening and to exchange ideas to see how these things progress. So thank you to all three of you for being with us today. Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you to you all for being with us, and thank you also to those who have been with us online remotely. Thank you to the organizers for this great edition of FIC in Lille. It's really quite a feat to organize such an event and to bring together the entire community, an opportunity to thank them. And thank you so much to the translators who are doing a great job. You can't see them. And thank you also to all the technicians who have supported us for the last 3 days and who are doing a great job. Without them, we would not be able to organize this sort of event. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you for these 3 days. And I hope to see you all very soon. And of course, for next year in Lille. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.